And now, marine weather around Alaska. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook, here to close out the week, Thursday into Friday, and even looking a little beyond that. As far as ice development, with colder air that's plunging southeastward across the Bering Sea, we do expect ice growth here through the lower Chukchi Sea and then also along areas of the west and southwest coast. Right now we have rather windy conditions, blowing, drifting snow, gale force winds, in some cases higher gusts, along areas of the Seward Peninsula from basically Point Hope, Cape Lisburne southward to along the lower Yukon Delta. But once we get into later in the weekend, early next week, we should see colder temperatures more favorable for ice growth there, especially along the west coast. So what we have is an area of low pressure later tonight, early on Thursday morning, located just on the west side of the Seward Peninsula, with a strong cold front bringing in a shot of Arctic air across the Bering Sea. That cold front will be pushing through the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians in the early morning hours. And by the time we get into Thursday afternoon, we expect secondary low to develop here in the northwest Gulf, just off the Kenai coast. This will enhance snow around this system. Could see some accumulating snow around the Anchorage Bowl. And the cold front then continuing to work its way eastward into the Gulf. We still have on the backside of the low here at Norton Sound strong northerly winds that will keep the potential for blowing and drifting snow and considerable amounts of heavy freezing spray. So again, with this kind of pattern, we expect that to be the case here to round out the weekend. Of Friday, we find that still have a low here over the southwest, kind of along the Yukon, Kuskokwim deltas. The backside of the low, strong north flow through the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence Island. And then the cold air has made it at least into the North Pacific south of the Gulf of Alaska, but there's going to be a potent low, a storm force low, lift out of the North Pacific and take aim toward the Panhandle for Saturday. And so that system, as it drifts further northward, we expect winds to be increasing along areas of the Panhandle Friday night into Saturday. Also, precipitation, moderate to heavy amounts of precipitation associated with that low here for the early weekend. Before then, though, Thursday winds will be southeast to south, 15 to 20 knots. Inner channels, waves 3-4 feet. Outer channels, generally southwest, south winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 8 to 9 feet. Friday, southeast winds throughout the inner channels, 25 to 30 knots, gust as high as 40 knots there, Stevens Passage. And outer coast, 20-25 knot southerly winds with waves 9-10 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, strongest winds here at the entrance of Cook Inlet, southwest winds to 30 knots. Southwest winds off the Kenai coast, waves 7-8 feet there. Winds westerly within Prince William Sound, 3-foot waves. Northeast winds out of Kinnett Arm and Turnagain Arm with 3-foot waves there. For Friday, strongest winds will be outside of Hinchinbrook entrance here, north central Gulf. Look for west-southwest winds to 25 knots. Southwest winds 15 knots within Prince William Sound, 3-foot waves. Generally westerly winds across much of Cook Inlet, highest from around off of Anchor Point, 20 knots with 5-foot waves. And then in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, Thursday, southwest winds 25 knots. There's going to be that cold front pivot through with a secondary low trying to form in this region as we go through the day. So winds strongest 30 knot northwesterly winds with waves 13 to 15 feet on the Bering side of the peninsula. A little less so, 6 to 8 feet northwest winds to 25 knots on the Pacific side. Across much of the area Friday, west winds 20 knots, vicinity of Kodiak Island. Look for west winds 20-25 knots along the Alaska Peninsula. Highest waves will be running 8 to 10 feet just outside of Bristol Bay down through areas north of Cold Bay. Across the eastern Aleutians on Thursday, winds will be northwesterly to 25 knots, falling off to variable winds around 10 knots west of Adak. Waves highest here, the eastern half of the Aleutians, anywhere from around 12 to 16 feet. North Pacific side, 7 to 11 feet, especially the gap there between Nikolsky and Atka. And then for Friday, winds Northwest 20 knots, far eastern Aleutians kind of turn back toward the northeast, 15 knots there, Atka through Adak. And then they'll pick up, especially just west of Kiska. We expect 40 knot northeasterly gales ahead of the next low that's just southwest there of the western Aleutians with waves 15 to 17 feet. Along the southwest coast Thursday, so in the wake of the cold front sweeping through the Alaska Peninsula, winds will be out of the west, northwest 30 to 35 knots, waves 8-9 feet, Kuskokwim, Bristol Bays, 17, 16 feet there, St. Matthew down through St. Paul. Low pressure circulating here west end of Norton Sound, so southeast ahead of it, but turning westerly along areas of the lower Yukon Delta where there is ice in place. And then for Friday, the low pressure sits here just inside of the southwest coast. Northeast winds out of Norton Sound as high as 25 knots off the lower Yukon Delta, turning northerly, north side of Nunavik Island, and as much as 30 knots there at St. Matthew. But otherwise, we're just going to continue to see this pump down the colder air here across the northern portions and southeastern Bering Sea. On Thursday, winds will be easterly off of the Seward Peninsula, but turn northwesterly sharply on the backside to 35 knot gales, waves as high as 10, 11 feet there around Gamble. As we go up the Chukchi Sea, look for east-northeast winds 25 knots. Where there is open water or any areas of water, waves could run 4 or 5 feet. Along the Arctic coast, a mixed bag of 10 knot winds southerly there, Prudhoe Bay, but easterly at Kaktovik. And then for Friday, winds will be east-northeast along the Arctic coast all the way down through Wainwright. Increasing, though, northeast to north winds to 30 knots there through the lower Chukchi Sea. Waves could be as high as 8 feet there, lower Chukchi Sea. And then as they pass, the winds pass through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence, look for north gales as high as 40 knots in the vicinity of Gamble, with waves running 10 to 12 feet where there is open water.